Hey, and welcome to the Beard Guru Australia podcast, Season 1, Episode 6. I'm your host, Danny Elliott, aka The Wolfman. Filmed right here at Valley Sound Studios, Belconnen, Canberra, Australia. On this episode, we are thrilled to have such a driven, creative educator, the one, the only, Ethan Wilson. Go through Ethan's journey, starting all the way back in primary school. He's travelled between many places, and this individual has something more than just being a school teacher in mind with his educational skill set. Ethan has recently embarked on his first studio album here at Valley Sound Studios, and he's also starting to collect all the information and resources we need here to start creating an academy of our own, as we get a perspective of the education and music worlds crossover, which I'm sure many of you viewers and listeners have either tried or wanted or even done a successful crossover of work and passion yourselves. Let's go! Hello, and welcome to Beard Guru Australia podcast, Season 1, Episode 6. We have with us special guest, Ethan Wilson. Welcome.
What's up?
All right, Ethan, we're going to run through a couple of different things, but you primarily gravitated towards the educational sort of industry for your work.
Yep.
And you also have a strong passion for mainly music.
Yeah.
So we'll go back and forth a little bit on those, starting all the way back as far as you want to go.
Yep.
But the first main question that I want to ask with that is, what came first?
Definitely the music.
Definitely the music?
Yeah. From like even before I could remember, I've just always been driven towards music, singing, yeah.
Okay. So you weren't really wanting to become a teacher, essentially, like before you got interested in music?
I wanted to do something where I wasn't working in a white office job, like white collar job, or like stuck in an office, but I also didn't want to do, like I wasn't very good with hands-on stuff either. But I knew that whatever I wanted to do, I wanted to like try and improve the world, like, you know, leave the place better than when you find it. And music and education were the two pathways that I found to do that. But music was definitely the first one.
Okay. Well, let's go. Tell us a little bit of the start entry to your musical journey. What was the thing that set it off?
When I was about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old, and I'd stay with my mum, and like, so that was my mum and my older sister, and we lived in this apartment in Balgala Heights. I remember my mum had a brother, so one of my uncles used to come around and play us guitar and stuff, and then he'd play like Green Day by like Time of Your Life by Green Day, and I'd watch him play and be like, oh, that looks like fun. And then I'd watch video hits on a Saturday morning, and I was surrounded by contemporary music the whole time. Like my mum was in her early 20s when she had me, and so that definitely influenced my love of rock, my love of like, you know, Pearl Jam, Smashing Pumpkins, Fuel. They were all played on the radio that we're listening to, along with like Matchbox 20. It was just, music sounded fun. It brought me so much joy. And then, you know, my first two biggest influences, Wiggles and Backstreet Boys. So
yeah, right. So having that, so it obviously like took a hold of you in some sort of way, captivated you. You're like, oh, this is really cool.
Yeah.
An interest in somewhat. And so what was the transition, or when was the first point where you kind of were like, I want to do this? Was there a significant artist or like a time?
I remember, I don't know what it was, around the time of 4 or 5 years old, I used to really love boy bands. So Backstreet Boys, Human Nature, NSYNC.
Five.
And literally like just singing along to those in my bedroom and pretending I was like a rock star. And then I remember I had a Backstreet Boys DVD, and I'd watch them on stage. I'm like, that looks like so much fun. So really it was all about the music to start with, even before it became about like wanting to, you know, make a good impact on the world. It was just like, every time I heard music, I felt this move to just want to sing, to play it, to create it, to give back the joy that it kept giving me.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I think a lot of people with music, they either, from talking to a few different people being at this studio, a lot of people, they more so just because they want to be that as their career, but then you've got other people like yourself who, and the way that I got into music was, I remember watching Angus Young, just like I loved music for ages. And I was
Yeah.
about 11 or something. We got this DVD and watched Angus Young, and I was just like watching how much fun he was having while putting out this energy, while all these people were like enjoying
Yeah.
it. And I was like, holy shit, like this guy's like, this is his job.
Yeah.
I was like,
And that was
that
it,
is
like-
incredible that you can like give out this energy and have these people, you know, really enjoy it. So essentially, I think that is a lot of sort of ways that people get stuck into music where they see someone like on stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, even if it's a video,
yeah.
you see the effect of what they do to other people, and you're really enjoying it.
Yeah.
And you see that other people enjoy what you're enjoying.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh. But it's funny because a lot of people that, you know, don't want to get into music, they love watching it.
Yeah.
They can't picture themselves being in that position on stage. So that's
Yeah.
the difference. Like you and I have had those moments where I still get it to this day.
Yeah.
You know, I see a live band, I'm like, shit, like they're doing this, this, and this.
Yeah.
I remember what it was like last time on stage. Maybe I should try that.
Yeah.
Where people, they just are there and they're like, why can't you just enjoy the moment? And it's never like that for me.
Yeah.
I'm always like watching and thinking about, I wonder if they did this, like if I did what they did, you know?
Literally, I remember in high school, I used to go home and instead of doing my homework, I'd watch like YouTube videos of my favorite bands playing. And in particular, like I'd watch Tim from Rise Against at these underground clubs just swinging his mic. And I always wanted to do that. But these days, I know if you do that, there's a chance of mics flying off, getting hit in the head. The sound guy hates you because you're ruining the
You can only do that if you're like, you know, real buddies with the venue and the sound guy. And also you're probably smart to have like a backup or even have a fake one.
Yeah, exactly.
Do it with a fake one.
Yeah, but I think it's that element of like you watch them on stage and that was my homework, was like to go home and watch them play live and like memorize lyrics and learn the songs on guitar. And it was just all like my homework was always music.
So when you, I'll let you go through, if you go from, you know, when you were a young kid towards what you just said, like school and stuff.
Yep.
Was there anything significant from that point to that point, or would you say you just had that general interest from a kid, and then when was the point where you actually started doing music? Was there much in between, or was there just a certain point where it took over? Was there a trial and error and stop? Yeah, there definitely was. So I'll start like I have a really good memory. Like my friends are just like, you remember so much. So there's one memory that I don't obtain personally that I've been told a story by my mum, who's like at daycare. She got called up one day because I was teaching everyone lyrics Pretty Fly for a White Guy by The Offspring. How old's that?
Daycare, like
5,
3,
4.
4. Yeah. They're like, yeah, she's probably teaching Bar Bar Black Sheep first. But I do remember singing like Torn by Natalie
Imbruglia.
Yeah. And I remember singing that at daycare. Like I actually have memories of going around just singing songs at daycare. And so
you're the top 40 recreator.
Yeah.
Top 40 DJ at daycare.
Literally. And so I do that. And then in my bedroom, so I moved to Blaney after Balgala Heights with my grandparents, and my mum and my older sister all moved there, and mum went to uni. But I remember like I just always was singing, wanting to sing. You know, my grandparents always took us to the Wiggles concerts. And so even when I started school, I'd come home, I'd shut my door and I wouldn't have a mirror or anything, but I'd just throw on my favorite CD at the time and just play like I was playing live to that CD. And that happened all the way through high school. And eventually I got like these double mirror doors in my bedroom when I moved to Orange. I'd be practicing in front of that. But I didn't actually pick up a guitar until I was 9 years old. I remember I was in year 3 and they were starting a guitar club at school at lunchtimes, and I begged my mum and my grandparents, I'm like, I really want to do a guitar club, but I don't own a guitar. And all week they're like, oh, we're not going to be able to get you one. We're not going to be able to afford it and stuff. And then I came home the day before guitar club was due to start, and I still have it today. It's this little Suzuki acoustic guitar that I still write all my songs on.
So where did that come from?
They bought it.
Oh, they did? They got you one?
Yep, they got me one. And, you know, it was one of the cheaper ones, but I was still so grateful.
You don't need to spend money on something that you're not sure if the person's going to excel in. I'm telling you that right now.
Exactly.
Some parents do that and they buy like a grand piano.
Yeah.
For like 15, 16 grand or something.
Yeah.
And then it sits there and they do like a couple of lessons and then they don't use it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they got so much money they can do that, but still you shouldn't do that even if you've got money.
I know.
So that's pretty, you must appreciate that now a lot. I appreciate my mum got my first guitar, and without that action, I don't think I would have had the opportunity to do it myself.
Yeah.
So that must be pretty cool. So what was the situation changed? They just saw the drive in you, what happened?
I actually don't know what made the change. Maybe it was just like, maybe they were playing it on a little bit, or maybe
To surprise you.
Yeah. Or maybe like, they just decide to budget aside or chip in together,
or the opportunity came up and it was a lot cheaper than they thought.
Yeah. And I remember at school, like early on at school,
you wouldn't have cared at the time. You was like, sick guitar.
Yeah, exactly. 9 years old, you don't think about that kind of stuff. But the few years leading up to that, I was actually, and I still am, a very emotional person. But as a little kid, like, it was more intense. And I remember my year 2 teacher telling mom that she needed to find a way to harden me up. Like, I couldn't take the slightest bit of feedback without tearing up and crying and stuff. I was like one of those kids. I was a crier. But so I'm wondering if this was like if we support and encourage him in what he wants to do, like, maybe it might help balance that out and give him a place to put those emotions instead and give him something more to focus on rather than, being such an emotional kid.
Yeah, okay. I think it's important as a child to have something that you can get lost in.
Yeah.
Because you don't think of, it's already hard enough with situations of every day being a kid, dealing with, small problems as a child are much, much bigger.
Yeah.
I think it goes all the way up through, and then adolescence, you start transitioning into having to stomach a lot more stuff.
Yeah.
But if you don't do activities like sport or music or art or something as a kid,
something that is like a relationship between you and an external source that isn't putting pressure on you and that you enjoy and you can get lost in and you get in the flow in.
So once you kind of picked up that and started taking it, like, let's go further. So you obviously went to the club, right?
Yep. So I went to the club, but I actually think, so I went to the club for the first 5 weeks and then I kind of started going like every now and then throughout the term because it was on a Wednesday at lunchtime. So I was like, you had to go out of your own time. And unfortunately, I was becoming very social in year 3, year 4 as well. And so my friends were like, oh, no, come out and play. And I was just like, oh my God, like I got to choose. And so I'd start skipping the club. And then I put the guitar down for ages, like a very long time. I didn't pick it up again until, I'm talking a few years. I'm talking like, I don't think I picked it up again until, so I put it down, I would have been about 10. I was in guitar club on and off for the first year. And then I stopped doing it. And I didn't pick it up again until I was about 13 or 14 when my other friends actually started picking up instruments as well. And they're like, oh my God, we should do a band. I continued to sing. I'd continue going home and, learning songs and going through my different genre music phases. Like I went through a Shannon Noel country phase and did all that. And then when I was about 13, 14, I hit punk rock and found Rise Against it. And that was when I started realizing like, I want to do something in the world, like, and not change the world, but just to improve it, to find a way to be better. And
isn't that funny that punk rock did that? Because punk rock is like anarchy and like rise against the government and stuff, and their status quo. And I guess there is a sense of drive and change with punk. Yeah. But so go into that a little bit deeper. So what was the certain, obviously Rise Against was a big effect.
Yeah.
And then what was a certain sort of push towards you going, I want to make a change. I'm just not getting the connection here fully. Can you go into more depth? Why?
Yeah. So right before.
Was there other aspects other than the music at that time of your life?
So actually, funnily enough, it's all related back to music. Yeah. So up before that point, so like between the age of 10 and 12, I went through a mad emo phase with My Chemical Romance and Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco. And yeah, definitely. And I went through that phase, and that's when my angsty teenage emotions were starting to change, and that was the music that was hitting me. But right before all of that, I noticed a lot of the pop music and a lot of the music became love songs, and it was love song after love song after love song after love song. And it was just like all like personal issues and breakups and get together and all this really personal social stuff. But it's just like, so when I discovered Rise Against,
it's a bit self-centered, isn't it?
It was, and that was my problem. And I'm like, look, like yes, emo was very self-centered in its own self. And so I went through that self-centered phase. But then after 3 or 4 years of being pumped with that stuff, to find Rise Against was like a breath of fresh air. And not only was there stuff like like, yeah, they had a couple of personal songs because punk rock is personal, but majority of their stuff was like, we can all come together. We can all
Situational growth of a group.
Yeah,
That's
and it was
very
all
much what I was
resilience.
against.
Yeah.
So hitting that point and having to change, what? Because obviously you said at the start that you really wanted to make a change. That's why you kind of got into education, right? Because
Yeah.
you don't want to sit at the desk and you don't want to be on the tools.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So obviously the music, maybe not fully initially in the front part of your brain, but there's subliminally things that. Sorry.
No, that's cool.
There was things there that essentially would have pushed an effect on you going, there's something bigger than just singing about yourself, singing about your problems.
Yeah.
These guys are singing about bigger things.
Yeah.
And then what was it that essentially gave you the first initial kick up of like, I want to do something with myself and put myself into the world and help the world in some way? You don't want to change the world, but you want to. A lot of people are happy just getting a job and getting by and just focusing on themselves, but you want to do something a little bit extra.
Yeah. So I think there are a few elements going on at that point then in my life as well, both at home and at school. And so like on the home front, it wasn't like just at my house, it was also at friends' houses and stuff, but like the whole standard of living, you could see underlying in parents and underlying in kids, there was like this misery, and it's like this misery that you know how the rest of your life was going to play out. And like, I don't know what it was. I went from being such an emotional kid, and I was still emotional in high school. Like, I was still terrible in high school, but I always had this like internal thought of like, there's got to be something more. Like, we can do better, we can live better, we can be better, we can feel better. I didn't know what it was, but it was just like this voice that consistently in the back of my head that goes, just keep pushing back, just keep pushing back. So between like kind of experiencing all of that, and then at school in year 8, I remember geography learning about like non-government organizations like Amnesty International and stuff. And I remember learning about how there was still children slaves in China, and kids were still getting married off in
shotgun weddings.
Yeah, exactly.
Still happens today.
Yeah, and I'm like, wow, like we're here complaining about our lives because we know how they're going to play out, but there are people out there that like don't know if they're going to see their birthday next year. Yeah. Like, there's millions of people out there, and in a very Spider-Man mentality, it's just like, if you have the ability to be born into middle class, upper class kind of society, like Western first world culture, whatever, and you get it, like you have the ability to get a good education, you have the ability to have that stable support, if you have the ability to take on a project such as art and whatnot, with that and thinking about the resilience in the community, you also have a responsibility to help bring the rest of the world up to where you are. Otherwise, the gap gets bigger. And that's not just in Australia, but like that is constantly spoken about around the world in politics. Like, the resources distributed are unfair, everything becomes unfair. And that's what punk rock was singing about. That's what that music was attacking. And it's just like, okay, so you can use music to promote a message, and sometimes it can be overdone. Sometimes it can be like, ugh, like they're singing about politics. But if you do it in such a way that you make it personal, it's just like,
I know, basically all of Rage's stuff is like headed straight at politics.
Yeah.
And it's like over the top in such a good and smart way.
Yeah.
That I think if you look at that side of it,
yeah,
and it definitely made movements.
Yeah.
A lot of bigger bands like that, they are just so clever in how they present it.
Yeah.
So I think doing it over the top in the right way is productive.
It is.
And I think there's certain things like not so much politics, but sort of rise against the situation with like Limp Bizkit took it to a different level.
Yeah.
Where that's cool. They get people to move and to riot.
Yeah.
But there was almost like a kill 'em all attitude, which is a bit extreme.
Yeah.
And I think that's why there's a lot of trouble around that sort of era with them.
Yeah.
But so what do you, when you're going with that, and you saw this, like this is pretty deep, right?
Yeah.
So you saw this, and what in you was like, what did this do to you? Because we still haven't got around to the part where it's changed you to want to do what? Like, I understand that there's all this stuff that they're kind of singing about, and you see this perspective.
Yeah.
But where did your perspective go? All right, now I'm going to actively do something.
So then the last half of my high school, like whilst I was practicing my singing, I'd also spend a lot of my time in the evening studying after I couldn't play music after a certain time due to everyone being home, studying what was going on in the world. And I went through a mad conspiracy theory phase, like as you do, everyone does at some point, and some people still are. But I learnt about overpopulation. Like I was literally Googling things like, what is the worst problem like the world faces? What is, and like just like flooding myself with this information and then trying to pick apart what
catastrophic search.
Exactly. And then, what was the bullshit from the, from like the actual factual stuff that is also being upfront and promoted. And then like, what's the media telling us? What's the media not telling us? And I started to get into that mind frame. And then it's just like, you learn to really research for yourself and understand who is effective in telling you the truth and where the fake news and the fake media comes from. And you got to constantly be changing because media is constantly sponsored by particular corporate ships and whatever and politicians. But I guess that point then made me go, all right, I don't just want to like do music because it's fun. I want to like do music because it's a powerful tool. It's a creative tool. People connect with it. Like, for me, it was bands like Rise Against Anti-Flag, Bad Religion. They hit the millions of people. And so you get, they support rights like veganism, they support Sea Shepherd, they support so many non-government organizations that I'd also learnt about in year 8. And it's just like, that's when you start leaning towards wanting to make a change. But I went through a big phase, like nearly over half a decade, between the ages of 17 till about, what would it be, even just a few years ago, like 24, 25, where I was like, I still don't know what I want to do and what the most effective direction is. And then it was recently I started watching documentaries like The Social Dilemma, 2040, and still continuing my research into what the world's biggest problems were and what the best angle was to come at it from.
Hold on. Are you about to say that you want to become Gandhi?
Yeah. Yes. But yeah, no. But, picture Gandhi in Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah.
But then I was like, all right, the biggest key thing that like is consistent and their biggest key points at the end of Social Dilemma and 2040 and Blackfish and all this was all education, which I was, had already gone to study on as a teacher by that point. And I was like, cool. So I can be a teacher and teach like 25 kids a year for the next 30 years of my life. And maybe, by the end I'll have taught a few hundred and maybe changed a few hundred, which is really cool. But there's already a lot of people at that level. So there's teaching and it's such a noble profession and it's such a good profession. But the education system, everybody also knows, is struggling a little bit with improving itself, and it's not improving itself quick enough because there's all these new information, new perspectives, changing world, exponentially changing world. So the next point is, how do you be a part of that change? How do you have a say on what's happening? And so I'm following a route to do educational consultancy as well.
Right. So I guess you look at a larger scale, but there's a lot of noise, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of fake news. There's a lot of fake opinion-based stuff that's not backed up by fact.
Yeah.
That is pushing a certain agenda.
Yeah.
That is not lying, but not showing the facts.
Yeah.
And making people be persuaded to think a certain way.
Yes.
Without having all the evidence and the facts.
Yeah.
So I guess when it comes to crossing over your music and your teaching and seeing, so you had that massive interest in music, and then all these sort of views and these bands were like connected into a lot of things that you're like, hold on, like there's all these non-profit, non-government organizations, right?
Yeah.
Trying to help the world.
Yeah.
And they're into that. So you're like, well, maybe there's you can do music
Yeah.
and also do something else that's outside of music that's positive for the world.
Yeah.
And not you don't have to stand in front of the president of the United States and yell at him and say, change the world, mate.
Yeah.
Where you can actually,
find your way into a meeting with the president of the United States and go, have you thought about this?
Because education and politics, they're two completely different things.
Yeah.
But they are the academically part, how do I say it? It's the part of the across the board of industries that academically can make change.
Yes.
Like you can be a doctor and be really smart.
Yeah.
But like it's a little bit different these days because blogs and podcasts are very, very educational and mass effect. Yeah. But in the sense of changing the government is either politics or education. Because they go, the politics the politicians aren't in the classes.
Yeah.
They aren't at the universities. They aren't at the schools.
No.
So they can take the feedback from the schools and the universities and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they can take the general public and then they have to make decisions, which is sort of good.
Yeah.
There's no other really way that you can do it. And if you are to do it other ways, it's going to take a long time to change as things do.
Yeah.
But they are the ways of things getting changed in the educational industries are changing dramatically overseas, not so much here.
Yeah. And I guess that's the thing, like, so, you hear about the countries in Europe and you hear about some schools in Japan and like, and it's actually funny when you compare Europe and Japan because Europe and not just all of Europe, it was like Norway and Sweden, Denmark. Yeah. Finland. That's what I'm thinking of.
Finland's very, very adaptive.
Yeah.
They're changing constantly.
They decreased their days at school and even their work days to 3 or 4 day work weeks.
And do they have longer breaks? Like a longer lunch? Like you can have a nap?
Yeah.
I think it's like a 2-hour break.
Yeah. Well, they even made the days a little bit shorter. They don't work as many, but they see their productivity went up because it was about the health and well-being of their people. And once they had that balance, then people they found were more productive and built the economy anyway.
Yeah.
Japan went the other way and like they have 6 days of school a week. Like you rock up at 6 a.m. most weekdays. I think it's like 8 a.m. on a Saturday and you can be there till like 6 p.m. at night.
Wow.
But they're still producing very similar level results. But I think it was...
But hold up.
Yeah.
If you look at the hours difference though and get the same results, isn't that like, wouldn't you choose the Finnish way? Because there's less time spent. That means you get more time in your life and you get the same results.
In a Western culture, yes, but I think that that's what it is. It's a cultural-based difference. So Japan is a culture very based around respect of authority, respect of elders, respect of their traditions, and even self-respect. And not to say Finland isn't, but Europe had, and Japan. So when you think about it, Europe and Japan had a reset after World War II. And I think when you are damaged by war as a country and then like the war's over, the country sits down and has a chance to breathe and go, right, whatever we just did, like that was scary. Like it's like post-trauma as a country. And they sit down and they go, how do we regulate now to make sure that doesn't occur again? How do we regulate now to make sure that we change and we do better? And it's that resilience to come back. So culturally, Japan embraced itself and they grew based around their own culture. Scandinavian countries created a brand new culture for themselves. And so, you have the international court over in those Scandinavian countries. A lot of the UN work is done in Europe. And, Asia's got a big part. So Asia and Europe are actually the countries with the focus of the future, whereas but Western-based cultures are very like productivity. Let's smash the economy. Let's squeeze the life out of people, get them wanting things and spending all their money and all their time. So they're not thinking about how to improve with all their money and time.
In the majority of the West and sort of situations,
Yeah.
talking about squeezing the most they can out of people to
Yeah.
turn them into consumers.
Yes.
Because if everyone starts turning to creators,
Yeah.
there's no one to consume.
You would think that. I think
That's what their fear is.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
That's the essentially looking at it in a sort of a, what's the word, like a darker view.
Yeah.
Is there is a overshadowing government in the Western world that, and not saying that it's all done like this.
No.
There's a lot though that is, and you can see it in these massive arguments they're having with news on like actual news channels. They're all news channels, but independent news channels now on like Facebook and stuff.
Yeah.
And then these major ones. It's very childish watching this, but they're all like, oh, you're generating fake news now. You're generating fake news. You're generating fake news.
And it's a taboo thing that's now like, I'm going to point at you and I'm going to point at you. And, but I think like, so on Spotify, I have a daily drive list and like it's a mix of news and music. I have, and not for any particular reason, like I don't set the order, it sets it for my algorithm. I have ABC up first, which is very left wing. I have Newsroom, which is up second, which is very right wing. I have this thing called Daily Pedestrian, which I always skip. It's meant to be for people in my generation, but it's celebrity news and I find it trashy. And then they have the 7 a.m. Project, which is the one that I love listening to the most. It's very independent. Like, they will criticize Labor when, Labor does a thing, or Liberal, but they won't just do that. They'll also look at immigration. They'll look at the 430,000 Indigenous Australians in Northern Territory and Western Australia who don't even have a birth certificate and can't register to vote. Like, could swing the vote massively to either way, but they don't get given the opportunity or the chance. Like, they actually give the voiceless a proper voice and like the time and I go and research the news if I find something like,
isn't that incredible?
Really interesting.
That like a lot of major news things would be like, Kim Kardashian wore a new dress, and we've got this problem that I didn't even know until you just said that.
but that's what I mean. Like, there's all these problems in the world, and until like you sit down and you listen and you research and you pick the facts from the fake news, like. It's investigative journalism is what the 7 a.m. is.
So also with you, I can see where your interests lie.
Yeah.
So out of a full loop, you like, and that's probably why you're drawn to education. I think you like the aspect of discussion and education because that's music. You're discussing stuff, right?
Yeah.
You're singing it, and then you go to a gig, and then you talk to people, and you investigate these backstories why they're invested in these organizations.
Yeah.
So you're up for
discussion
and education.
Yeah.
So what's that combined is being a teacher.
Yeah.
You discuss with people, and you because you always, even if you're the teacher, you can learn from even kids. Like you can learn off anyone.
Yeah. So
that must be, and obviously you can't just throw the fishing rod out there and pull in a music career.
No.
So obviously, I'm just trying to think, when was the point where you were like, because did you want, obviously it would be a dream to be a musician, right?
Yeah.
And that's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
But when was the point where you're like, I want to be a teacher?
So.
Because by the way, everyone, Ethan is a teacher.
Yeah.
He's qualified.
Yeah. So when I finished high school, I still had no idea what I wanted to do. I tried to do a Bachelor of Arts a couple of times at a uni in Bathurst while I was living in Orange.
Why?
I got early entry and I was just like, cool, I'll just do that, see where it takes me.
Okay.
I ended up finding myself dropping out a couple of times. I was like, I shouldn't have thrown myself into that. I actually should have gone traveling. And I have, slight regrets I didn't do that, but life is what it is. But eventually when I turned 21, I ended up with a son. And like the day he was born, his mum had fallen asleep in the hospital and I was just like there holding him. And I'm like, God, like, what do I show this kid? Like, how do you be a parent? So, and I really had this deep reflective moment, laying there holding him, and two of my main thoughts that still are driving me to this day. The first one was, how do I make sure this kid has a good life? And I never use the term best or perfect. There's this great quote by John Steinbeck that I love, which is, now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good. So how do I provide him with this whilst, still having my own life? like, how do you balance that as a parent? And my thought process to follow that up was, one, you don't tell, you show. So I wanted to show my son that you can still live your life as long as you bear the consequences, both the good and the bad, of every decision you make. Just because life throws a challenge at you doesn't mean it has to stop, or doesn't mean you have to always take a step back when you need to and take a breather, but don't let that be your settling point. But
isn't it funny how we have a lot of control, and then when things get out of control, we focus on the thing that we can't control.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's a few things that you can always control, and that's your reaction, which is very hard.
Yeah,
because you don't want bad things.
Yeah,
but so it sounds like you reacted to this situation, right?
Yeah,
and then so did you get changed by thinking about all these processes of becoming a parent, and it changing your perspective? And then what happened from there? What was there a change of action? Was your son your drive into? Because it sounded like you were kind of just, a door was open, you go to it.
Yeah.
And now this was like, I think I want to create, like you were creating prosperity of your son, right?
Yeah.
You're like, what's the future of my son?
Yeah.
But I can have, because he's only so little, there's a certain amount of years before he can actually start making logical choices of his world and his path forward when he becomes an adult. So what happened at that moment? Did that moment change, or was it like over the next sort of, because it's about 6 months to 2 years where everything constantly changes for you becoming a parent?
Yeah. So taking a step back actually to when I was 19, I'd just come out of high school. I was doing some laboring work for my dad, like a bit of electrical work. And I moved out of my parents' house and in with a friend. And so I'd like work for my dad, but I was still doing music at that point. So I was in this like 2-piece grunge thrash metal band with a mate back in Orange. And there wasn't a gig for youth bands in Orange, basically. There was nothing. There's nothing for all ages. There's nothing like that. So out of my own money, I'd save up by working for my dad. I'd pay the rent and, get the groceries and whatnot. But once a week every month for once a week when I was 19, I used to run these gigs at the CWA hall. So I'd live off like wheat beaks and boiling water and a bit of sugar for like an entire week.
Yeah.
Just to play these shows, and I'd had like friends from TAFE and stuff, and they would be playing as well. So I ran these youth gigs, all ages. The local council kind of caught on. They started giving us support. I didn't have to spend as much.
You could actually eat food.
Yeah.
You upgrade to Megarang.
Exactly. But then I actually found myself starting up a youth council for the Orange City Council. And that I noticed was making a change. It was bridging these schools that wouldn't normally come together, because like there were high school age kids like coming to the council meetings and stuff, and like, all right, how do we close that gap here? How do we make this a youth town? And then when my partner at the time did fall pregnant, I was like, I actually like, as much as I love doing this music and, I used to live paycheck to paycheck because it was just me, I'm like, okay, now I actually have to step up and maybe start considering something that's going to be a bit more stable with an income. Mm-hmm. So I started doing my youth work diploma and doing youth council, and I was doing that with the music as well, and it went hand in hand. When Ollie was born, so the second thought that I had after that first one was, all right, I need to do something now. I need to finish this youth work diploma. I was in a bit of debt at that point as well. I had friends moving in and out of the rental I was in all year, and some people weren't paying what they owed me and whatnot. I was like, I need to get out of debt. So I moved away for a year down to the South Coast to help my uncle and my dad. They had a project down there. So, got out of debt, tried to save a little bit, finished my youth work diploma long distance. And then at the end of that year, I was like, youth work is cool, but like you get burnt out quite quickly. Like, you're working in the youth hostels and whatnot. And it's just like, how do you encompass, like, how do you still make a difference being a youth worker? So I applied for teaching. I'm like, all right, well, let's take the next step. And like, I had a few friends and even my mum constantly telling me like, you would be a good teacher because I worked well with youth. So I took the step into being a teacher. It still wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew it was a steady income. You know, they keep talking about they need male primary school teachers. And I was like, it'll be good, you know, for Ollie. Not only can I like help him with his work at school, then I can actually like help bring up his generation and like, you know, get that change in those thoughts happening as well. And then moving forward, as I said, I went and watched those documentaries while I was doing my degree, and education started being this constant like, this is where like education and technology is the investment for the future. And so I was like, cool, well, if I continue on the path I'm on, but like, again, I had that question in my head of like, what more can I do? Like, what step can I do to be a part of a broader picture, like, and an impact on the world? So
with education moving through there, I'm just thinking, so you've done that. That's the whole process. And you went through and you finalised your studies just recently.
Yeah.
And you've got your graduation coming out, which is excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And then, so that's cool. And we've talked a bit about the educational sort of side.
Yeah.
Now, as hard as it is, you're doing music and you've recently stepped up into a thing that a lot of musicians want to do, but it is hard, it is difficult.
Yeah.
But you're taking your music to another level, and you're doing an album by yourself, but then bringing it to a certain group of people.
Yeah.
To turn it into a project that is directed by you.
Yeah.
For your entity, which is your band, or your label, your artist label, which is essentially a session band.
Yeah. Yep.
And which is a lot of people do this these days. It's not the same as like getting into a garage and forming a band as mates. And I think this is the best way to take it professionally.
Yeah.
Faster.
Definitely.
Because it's not so much like you have a little bit more control about what happens, but also it's like prescribed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what's made you do, like you've obviously had passion for music and stuff, but it's a lot of people, even if they've got like a lot of time and money, they don't do it because there's a lot of effort.
Yeah.
There's more effort than time and money.
Definitely.
And there's a lot of risk in regardless if you do it this way or another way, but even this way is a little bit safer, but there's still a risk of it not pulling through from musicians, like session musicians and other people involved pulling in and out. So there's a lot of effort and there's a lot of potential letdown that can happen. Yeah. So what made you go, all right, that obviously, I mean, maybe not, but was there a position in your working and your educational situation where you're like, no, I really think I can, I think I'm ready to take this step with my music?
I think I've always been trying to take steps forward with music, and, you know, the dream from when I was 13, 14 and my mates picking up instruments was to have that band and to have that, you know, punk rock band experience, you know, travel the world with your mates, play some fun music together, have a good time, that kind of a lifestyle. And having music such a deep part of my own personal history and what I feel is a deep part of my identity, I was like, whatever I do, I can't stop doing music. I remember there's been a few times I'd be like, oh, if this band doesn't pan out, I'm going to drop music altogether. I just don't know what I'm going to do with it. Like, because, you know, at times I question if I even was a real musician, because I was always surrounded by people that did have, like, they had all the training, they had the music theory, they put their lives into it, and I thought that they were going to, like, go somewhere more with it than, you know, where, like, how far I've come at the moment with it now. But the problem with that is that what they don't tell you is it is very, very hard to always get 4 or 5 people in a room together. Like, that is actually...
It's called herding cats.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Literally. So, you know, trying to get...
I don't understand that. So I have always, whenever I've been in a band, I've been in a few projects and stuff.
Yeah.
When I say, and I work out, and it takes me like less than 24 hours when someone asks, can you jam this day? I can either say no straight away.
Yep.
Within like an hour or so. If it's yes, I go, I'll get back to you. Pretty soon I get back to them before 24 hours and I get there.
Yeah.
And I think there's a difference. Some people are, I'm going to say this in a way that's so blunt. Some people are, no matter how much you believe them, they are all talk.
Yeah.
Like, they make you believe.
Yeah.
And they might be a good person.
Yeah.
But some people are just full of shit.
Yeah.
And they can talk their way out of anything.
I know. But don't get me wrong. I've been on both sides of the spectrum because I've occasionally joined a project that's already been started, and it's like I'm like, oh yeah, this would be fun, whatever. All I could do is rock up. But then I'd rock up and I'd play the music for like a few times, like for a few practices, and they'd be like, this definitely isn't my genre. It's not my style. Like I really can't see myself performing this. I can't see myself recording this. I can't see myself pursuing this
project.
But I at least have the courtesy. I wouldn't just ghost them. I'd like actually message like, hey man, like just letting you know I'm not feeling this. Like I'm going to try this other project. I don't want to be split myself too far. I appreciate the opportunity. I hope like this project moves forward by all means, and you get what you want out of it. It's just not for me.
All right. So when it comes down to a bit of a crossover, essentially with your educational and your music, do you think? I've noticed that teachers have got this. What's the word? I've got this like natural, well, not like this learnt, or maybe natural, whatever it is. There's this certain thing I've noticed with teachers, because there's been yourself and a few others that I've been dealing with lately that are creative.
Yeah.
And what creativity actually needs, it's weird. So a lot of creative people are very unorganized.
Yeah.
But when it comes to creativity, the actual art, it's crazy sometimes, or sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
But a lot of time it'll be like, if this is the way, it's crazy. But then they get really organized to do the art thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if that's a crossover for you, or I look at it like these teachers that are creative like yourself, might not be you, that's why I'm asking. Is it that you've learned a lot from, because you must be admin smart and organized and time management and people management.
Yeah.
So it's actually an attribute that will contribute to doing an art project.
I think it's kind of a coin. There's two faces for this question. There's definitely an admin, organizational, like, you plan out your whiteboard. So like, having worked here, you've seen my whiteboards at home that I used to make my album, my checklists and all of that.
Yeah.
So there's definitely that element where we can organize ourselves to do something creative. But on the flip side of that, creativity is also like, and I've had many conversations with teachers around this, it's a flip side to stop thinking about school and about kids, because like a lot of teachers are also parents. Not all teachers, but a lot of teachers are also parents.
Yeah.
And the conversations that I've had with them is like, I go home and I still use the strategies at home that I'm using at school. Like it's like being a teacher isn't something you switch your brain off to. And even with the workload now for teachers to go home and do the lesson planning in their own time, to do the marking in their own time, and having that like, there's almost a disjointed work-life balance.
Why is that? Why are you expected to do so much in your own time?
Because the education system is improving. So like what we're teaching kids is improving. Like, kids get to do cooking and growing vegetable gardens in primary school now. So there's all these new models and new things coming in, and new research especially. But the flip side to that is that there's so much more to plan, to organize, to consider. So you're trying to incorporate all these new key learning areas and new curriculum, that you're trying to find this balance, but it just, like, how do I put this? There's not enough time to stop and go home and turn it off. Like, you're constantly thinking about your planning. So it's such a big question, that one. Like, that one's got a big answer to it.
So what about, let's go into what you just said.
Yeah.
So why do teachers are expected to take their work home?
Because there's not enough time in the day. So like as a kid, like, I don't know if you remember being at school, but it would drag on. You'd be like, oh my God, this day's going on and on and on. On the flip side of that, as a teacher, there are not enough hours in the day to get through everything you need to teach.
Yeah, as you get older, things go faster because you get more active. You learn more skills, you can do more things, it goes faster.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that there's a max limit to a lot of skill sets that you can do by yourself as one human.
Yeah.
Like it just is. But what about, so you are expected to reach deadlines of markings and stuff like this, right? So if you don't do it in the time that you're given at school, if you don't do it in the time, you're penalised in some way, or it's reflected bad as a worker.
It's reflected bad as a worker, and when you get around to doing your report cards and those kind of assessments, you find that you're so far behind on the marking, you don't know where your kids are at with the levels. So there's like the state now provides, because the state is in charge of education, the state now provides like benchmarks of roughly where your kids should be at level. And, you know, depending on the socioeconomic level of your school may depend on where those kids are at. But the key, so in all the state, like every state has a standard level expectation of teachers. The first level I've noticed in most states is to know your kids and how they learn. So coming back to the question even of like, why do we take our work home? It's like there is a holistic sense in teaching the kid now. Back in the day, it used to be completely academic. It was strictly academic. Now research...
I completely disagree with just doing that. Some people like myself, I can learn academic things and have an academic part of my brain that is very good, but it's only triggered by certain things. And it took a long time to figure that out. Where if at school, if they experimented, I use perfect example. I think I've said it on every podcast. I was in math class. I was so disinterested in math. It's so useful, and my parents and my teachers told me it's useful. I didn't see it. Because I'm like, what are these numbers? Like, this is boring. Like, I see these, you know, these actors, these movie stars, you know, these rock stars, these people that I want to be. Do they need maths? No, they don't need maths to do that. But
they don't look like they're using math, but it's some area.
They probably run like Conor McGregor. He runs a business. He would use maths to figure out. He would figure out costings and finances. It's very useful in every single situation in life that you want to be successful. Now, what I was doing, I was drawing guitars on the math paper and actually using it as like work out my geometry because they had the lines and stuff, and that's what you do in some maths. But the teachers look at like that, like I'm not concentrating on what's on focus. But little do they know that my brain was engaging in maths in the way that I could understand how to use it. And that's the difference now. I think they're starting to do that, which is good.
Yeah, definitely. So, and that's also how the system's changing because all this new research is coming out. The system is changing exponentially, and it's hard for teachers and the system itself to keep up with the research.
Well, so my question is, why aren't they... I don't know, why aren't they changing so you get paid more to do more hours? Like,
I know.
I just see you guys and talk about this, and you got this extra stuff. And look, and to be honest, to be a teacher, you have to have some passion in it. There's no way no teacher can not have some passion in whatever they want to teach, or whether it's they just want to be a teacher and educate people and help. There has to be that aspect. You can't just do it because you just want a job, because you have to do so much extra. But do you reckon it's going to change? Like, I look at it like, okay. I don't understand that, because they give you a certain amount of times in the school day, and then you work after there, and then you haven't completed it. You're like, oh God, I got to do all this stuff, and you can't do it, and then you got to do it, and then you got to do it overtime, and then you can't teach as good.
And even if you decide to like cut back on the work so you can spend time with the family, then the teaching falls behind. But if you actually put the effort into the teaching time, you don't always get to be present with your family at home, or your passions and whatever. So,
do you reckon AI will help marketing and stuff?
It definitely can be used, and that's actually one of the key educational consultancy areas. So there's like specific key areas you can do as an educational consultant, and one of the big ones up and coming is how do you use technology? It's meant to be in the classroom is the big focus, but I think that there should also be a perspective where it's looked at how can you use it to decrease the workload for teachers and students. Like if AI is going to become a part of like the 21st and 22nd century, as it, you know, we're getting our AI GPST chats, whatever. If it's coming on that quick, then can we be preparing to utilize it in a way where it's actually supportive to the environment rather than
it's working in every industry.
Exactly.
So it will work in teaching. Just because you haven't seen it directly, I haven't seen it directly, it will work in every industry. And there's always need for human element. So I'm just thinking, could it be that if it takes it away from the actual educational time, because you sometimes you might not know things and you have to do a lot of research because you have to educate. If they got questions, you have to answer. Whereas not to use solely AI, but you can help prepare and find information that you need.
Yes.
Which is the main point that you...
In different areas. But if you have one area that's got a low socioeconomic and all your kids are filtered to that area, like that's their, they have like, what do you call them? Like the boundaries of like where your kids can go to basically. And unless you get a special scholarship, like let's say Canberra, for instance, if you're living up in Taylor, you would have to go to a school in Taylor. But if there was a really nice school down south, you'd have to apply for a scholarship to get to that area. So even at that level, it's segregated on socioeconomic as well. So, and that's what we were looking at as a youth council when I started it too, is like, how do you get these different socioeconomic schools to come together? And it's got to be like you create youth hubs, you create a place where they can mix and match. And yes, there's a lot of safety issues around that, but we are getting better, I personally feel, as a society and with research when you compare data and whatnot, at being able to create safe boundaries and safe places like that for all youth.
Well, we'll have to pretty much wrap it up.
Yep.
Let's do 3 minutes.
Yep.
So let's recap. What I want you to do is go back.
Yeah.
And if you were to talk to someone a similar situation as you were when, say, you started changing a little bit forward in your life, Rise Against, finding that and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you wanted to start bands and you wanted to, because I know that you started music before you did the education stuff.
Yeah.
So let's go there. What would be the point that you would tell someone at that point in their life, if it was someone similar to you, not exactly you, going through that, and then what you were trying to do then, you were starting to realize all these things that, like, you know, these organizations that these bands were part of, there's like this bigger picture that's really helpful that's not really talked about.
Yeah.
So what would your encouragement to them be, the first point?
My first point would be definitely believe in yourself and have resilience. Like, just because you get knocked back, just because life throws challenges, it's not a message from the universe or, you know, the world against you. It is literally the gravity of you as a tree growing. Like, you're always trying to reach the sun. There's going to be storms. There's going to be hard days. But Buddhist mentality is that good moments and bad moments are like waves. They just pass over. Don't accept those challenges as a failure or a stopping point. By all means, like, you know, don't bang your head against the same brick wall, but be very aware of the challenges that you face and find ways through them, around them. And if you can't, let them pass and just keep steady, keep the resilience.
Okay. Coming into your challenges with your sort of balance between music and having a work sort of career driven around education, what would you give people? Because there would be a lot of teachers, and I've come across a lot of teachers that do music, right? Or arts, right? So music, let's just focus on that.
Yeah.
So direct question to you is, what's your best advice at the moment through your experience so far of balancing the two? Because you're an educational worker, and you love doing music, and you're doing it on you're taking it to a professional level. Yeah. So how would you? What's the best piece of advice you can keep this at the best way possible, both sides? Routine.
You got to have a key routine. You got to have your set times for your creativity, and you got to have your set times for your, your lesson planning and your teaching and your work. So, even just recently, like, I'm very skeptical of AI stuff, but I even used my Snapchat AI to build me a timetable the other day for, like, my fortnightly routine and then my school holidays and stuff, and it smashed it. Like, it's given me an hour to do a music a day. It's given me time to do my lesson planning. Like, I found myself not being able to balance it for a little while there last couple of weeks, and I had a chat with my AI Snapchat in the bath the other day, and we spoke quantum computing and stuff, and I was like, hey, can you build me a timetable? I need this in it, this in it, this in it, this in it.
Yeah.
And it went, yeah, I can help you do that. Do this in week 1, this in week 2, this in your holidays, and it's made all the world difference. I've got time for exercise every day. I've got,
And Ethan is now a robot.
I am now one of the underlords.
Cool. All right. Well, it's been good having you on, man.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, man.
Thanks for sharing everything, and I hope everything goes really well.
Thank you.
This has been the Beard Guru Podcast Australia. Sorry. This has been the Beard Guru Australia podcast. Yeah, coming right at you. Right, that's it.
Sweet. Utah.